From the Syrian frontier in the north to Gaza's edge in the south, Israel is facing mounting security challenges along its borders. Overnight on the Israel-Syria border, 7 Islamic State militants were killed by an Israeli airstrike after they were spotted crossing into Israeli territory from Syria. Syrian government forces redeployed along the border after clearing out rebel and Islamic militant fighters.
Meanwhile, on the southern border, Israel has blocked the supply of fuel and gas to the Gaza Strip in retaliation over Palestinians setting fire to Israeli lands. Well, with us to discuss Israel's current and perhaps new security challenges are Hanan Gefen. He's the former commander of the Army's 8200 intelligence unit and Major General in the Reserves Yaakov Amidror. He's also the former chairman of Israel's National Security Council. Yaakov, let me start with you. We're hearing reports of another ceasefire or truce between Hamas and Israel, mediated by Egypt, the UN. From what it sounds, it basically sounds like it could be just returning us to the status quo. But what should a longer-term truce or ceasefire look like?
Long range, I don't know. But ceasefire is supposed to be back to the principle which had been agreed after the last big operation in Gaza in 2013. It is about both sides do not use their capabilities to hit the other side. Gaza is in a poor conditions, and we try to help as much as possible. Hamas continue to control Gaza Strip, but does not fire into Israel what he can, including fire.
But it seems like every time we've done that, it's broken down. Shouldn't Israel be trying for something a little more, I won't say permanent, it doesn't exist, but stable?
For that, you need two sides. It's like tango. And the chances that Hamas preserve the ceasefire for a longer range is it's a hope more than reality. And remember, Hamas is not alone in the Gaza Strip. Hamas pushed all the time by the Salafist and more important by the Islamic Jihad, which is an organization which had been organized by Tehran many years ago, financed by the Iranians, pushed by the Iranians, and the Iranian dream is that Israel will be occupied with the problems in Gaza and will not be focused on the containment of the Iranians in Syria, which is much more important than all the fire which occur around Gaza.
Meanwhile, Mr. Gefen, we know there's another reconciliation attempt going on between Hamas and Fatah. To what extent would a possible truce between Israel and the Palestinians depend on that reconciliation between Hamas and Fatah actually working this time?
Well, the experience showed that there are two different passes. There's nothing to do. Different dynamics are going there between the Fatah and Hamas. And in between Israel and Hamas is trying, as General Amidror say, trying to recreate a balance between between their wishes and our deterrent force. To keep it calm. There is no way out as seen right now, which is not dramatic in the current situation.
You mentioned Yaakov, the situation in Syria. It's more pressing even than Gaza is. You're keeping the Iranians from the border. The Russians, or at least one Russian official, says there is an agreement to keep them 85 kilometers, over 50 miles. Is that reliable? Is that enough for Israel?
I didn't mention borders at all.
Okay.
The problem is not Iranians near the borders. The problem is Iranian independent war machine in Syria. If they are 85 kilometers from the border and they have rockets and missiles of 300 kilometers, why it should be matter that they are 85 kilometers from our border? What we want to stop and to contain, and if they continue to eliminate and to destroy, is an independent Iranian war machine, including anti-air missiles, ground-to-ground missiles, rockets, and so on. That we will not allow to build in Syria. We made a mistake. We allowed Hezbollah to have 120,000 rockets and missiles. we should not make the same mistake again and let the Iranians to build 150 kilometers from Israel and 1,500 kilometers from Tehran, another Iranian force which will be used in the future when they find it suit their needs against Israel.
And
so
Mr. Gefen,
it is not about the borders. It is also about the borders. We don't want the Iranians and Hezbollah to build bases near the borders. But the main issue is not the borders, it's the war machine.
Mr. Gefen, would you agree with Mr. Amidror? We also heard this week Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman also saying the danger in the north is much greater than the one in the south.
The Iranian danger is much greater, and the potential of it, because right now they are weak, but we know what we are aiming to, as General Amidror said. But on the other side, if you look at the Syrians, and we have a long experience with the Syrian forces, Syrian is now a much weaker state. The army is much weaker. They are internally focused and not externally. And what's more, on top of that, they're almost totally controlled by the Russians. You know, just to mention, the Russians are going to have 8 control points in the south of Syria, in the southern part of Syria. And this is it's an ongoing operation all across Syria. There are Russian guards, military police, to make sure that all the agreements are fulfilled to the letter. So and we have a long experience with Syria, going maybe 40 years ago, 40 years. We are entering a phase, I'm speaking of the Syrians, not the Iranians, a very stable and very quiet. We have 40 years of quiet borders. If it's depend on the Syrians only, it will go again for more 40 years. But then we have to take care of the Iranian problem.
The big question is how far the Russians, and not less important, the Syrians, will agree to let the Iranians to build their independent war machine in Syria. Where will they stop them, if they will stop them?
Well,
I'm not sure about it.
There was a time when the notion of Russians counting on the Russians would have been sounded ridiculous in Jerusalem, unheard of. Yeah, right. So let me just add, should Israel trust the Russians in this regard?
It's not a question if we trust them or not. They are there.
Yes.
It's not our decision. It's their decision. So it's not a question of trust. The question is how far they will let the Iranians to build their forces in Syria. We don't know. We are very determined to do the job by ourselves, but maybe the Russians, and more important, the Syrians, might understand that it is against their own interest that the Iranians will be too strong in Syria. Can we trust them? No. We are ready to do the job by ourselves. It might happen. They might come to the conclusion that it is not their interest. But it's not a question of trust. They are there.
Mr. Gefen, would you agree we can't trust the Russians?
I didn't say we cannot trust.
Yeah.
It's not a question of trust. They are there. So no one asking us if they will be there or not. It's not a question of trust.
Yeah, but that's briefly answer
Very
your question.
briefly, 10 seconds.
Yeah. Yes, we've seen the last 1.5 years that they are working coordinated with the American, the Israelis, the Jordanian, and keeping their, at least so far, they're keeping their words. They're keeping to the agreements. So hopefully it will stay so.